On a freezing January night in 1945, the Baltic Sea looked like a dark mirror reflecting the gray sky of war. The German ship. Wilhelm Gustloff left the port of Daas, Gotenhafen, today's Gdynia, carrying more than 6,000 refugees on board, civilians, soldiers, and nurses, all fleeing the advancing Red Army. Once a luxurious cruise liner, the ship had now become an overcrowded refuge where fear, hunger, and cold ruled. The corridors were packed with people. Women held their crying children tightly, while the few men still able to fight stared into the dark horizon, sensing that disaster was inevitable. The captain knew that sailing in such conditions was a tremendous risk. Soviet submarines were patrolling the Baltic, and thick ice could damage the hull. But staying on land meant certain death or captivity at the hands of the Russians. So, the decision was made to sail and attempt to reach the port of Kiel. As the ship slowly cut through the frozen sea, all lights were turned off to avoid detection by the enemy. In the darkness, only the creaking of steel and the whisper of the wind could be heard, as if the Baltic itself were holding its breath. At 9:00 p.m., the silence was shattered by a deafening explosion. The Soviet submarine, S-13, commanded by Alexander Marinesko, fired 3 torpedoes. The first struck the bow, the second hit midship, and the third destroyed the engine room, cutting off all power. In an instant, darkness and chaos engulfed the ship. People screamed and stumbled as the vessel began to list sharply to one side. Steel doors on the lower deck slammed shut, trapping hundreds below. Those trying to climb upward were shoved, trampled, and thrown off ladders in blind panic. Most of the lifeboats were frozen to the deck and impossible to use. The Wilhelm Gustloff was sinking at a terrifying speed. Mothers tried to throw their children into the few lifeboats. Soldiers struggled to impose order, but no one listened anymore. Within 40 minutes, the massive ship disappeared beneath the surface of the sea. The water was lethally cold. Anyone who fell in died within minutes, paralyzed by the freezing temperature. Survivors recalled the sound of the steel breaking apart, a monstrous roar followed by an eerie silence, broken only by the fading cries of the dying. By morning, the Baltic was littered with wreckage and frozen bodies. German rescue ships managed to save just over 1,000 people, most suffering from frostbite and severe injuries. More than 9,000 lives were lost that night, making the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff the deadliest maritime disaster in history, 3 times more lethal than the famous Titanic. Yet, the world barely spoke of it. Because the tragedy took place during the final months of World War II and involved German civilians, it was quickly silenced. The Allies did not want to evoke sympathy for Germans, and the Nazi regime preferred to conceal its own failures. As a result, the story of the ship nearly vanished from Europe's collective memory. Today, the wreck of the Kati, Wilhelm Gustloff, rests about 50 meters deep on the cold seabed of the Baltic, not far from the Polish coast. Divers who visit the site describe an unsettling calm, as if time itself had stopped. Inside the ship, there are still toys, documents, shoes, and watches, everything frozen in the moment of the disaster. Many divers speak of a heavy, suffocating silence, as though the sea still carries the echoes of thousands of voices that were never heard. The Titanic scow became a legend, a symbol of luxury and human arrogance. The Wilhelm Gustloff, however, remained in the shadows, forgotten, though its story is far more tragic. Yet when the Baltic ice cracks in winter, some say that within the sound of the waves you can still hear something, a faint whisper from that night when thousands of souls vanished into the darkness of Bay. The most tragic sinking in history.